Hello and welcome to Heart to Heart, the Chakra Talk podcast. I'm your host, Cher Shirai. And with me today is my guest, Maija, who is a Twitter personality I met who does really great meditation and has a lot to say about IFS and meditation. And I'm excited to talk about that today. And so welcome, Maija. How do you do today?
Thank you. I'm glad to be invited.
Yes, thanks. So the premise of this podcast is that I talk to people about chakras and ask them about them. As I mentioned before, I did not come to chakras voluntarily. They came to me. And you said that maybe something similar happened to you. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, I was familiar with Kundalini stuff before I started meditation 4 years ago. And I was like, okay, I'm definitely not going to go there because it just causes horrible stuff to people. I'm definitely going to avoid all of that. But then, of course, I meditated and I meditated more. And at some point, I started noticing a lot of physical and other weird symptoms. And honestly, I always thought that the chakras are kind of, like made up, like this hippie woo stuff.
Yeah.
And it was quite shocking for me to realize that, hey, I'm actually noticing this stuff. It definitely must exist on some level.
Yeah.
And I think it's very common, like most of my friends who meditate are into Buddhist stuff, and most Buddhist schools don't really talk about them. Yet all of my friends who meditate do talk about them because it seems they're quite difficult to avoid.
Yeah, I work with some Tibetan Buddhists, and they do talk about them, but in somewhat different way than the Hindu formulation. Sometimes they have like the 5 chakras versus the 7 chakras, but there's a lot of overlap between them for sure.
For me, it's also my background is in medical writing. Mm-hmm. So I used to be a very scientific materialist.
Yes.
For the most part, for all of my life, I've had kind of weird stuff happening. So I guess I was kind of like materialist plus. Like I believe this stuff because it happened to me, but everything else is probably woo.
Yeah.
But that's also like I'm definitely out of my comfort zone in this podcast because like half of the people who follow me on Twitter are medical people or like chronic illness patients.
Oh, interesting.
And for example, the question that people with chronic illness tend to hate the most is, have you tried yoga?
Okay.
It's like this question that everyone gets asked, like, have you tried yoga? Have you tried eating better? Have you tried sleeping better? Yeah. And it's seen as this very minimizing thing. Mm-hmm. And I've also written several medical books. So there's this bit of ickiness around the idea that people think that I have like switched from medicine to this woo side.
What's your perspective on that?
Like how the chakras fit into a medical framework, or
well, more generally, how the more spiritual or energetic side, say, fits in with the physical.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Like the first time I started getting symptoms in my chakras and in general, like symptoms from meditation, I was like, okay, how do I explain this in a scientific way? Yeah. Like I read some papers because there have been some papers written on what the chakras are. Mm-hmm. And people like, okay, they might be endocrine glands, they might be small nerve fibers firing. And at some point I was like, okay, I don't actually need to know. Like it's definitely something real, and I don't know if it's physiological or if it's energetic. That's not mappable to physiological stuff. I just know it's something very real and not made up.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where you've made your peace with it.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about the phenomenology? What does it feel like when you are maybe in touch with a chakra?
originally the symptoms were very much physical, and it's really like I was familiar with the spots where you're supposed to have stuff, and I think especially the third eye, because it has like the most woo name.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started to experience stuff, initially it was mostly like tingling, electricity, pressure,
Mm-hmm.
warmth, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then the classical kundalini, like climbing up your back.
Yeah.
But of course, it's kind of difficult to say, for example, like if there's something happening in your body or in your mind or on some other level that's not like at that exact spot, and then it's like, okay, is this a chakra symptom, is this an IFS part, or what's the connection with chakras and IFS parts anyway?
That is exactly the question I was just going to ask you. So how do you relate to them similarly or differently? And maybe can you just say a few words about what an IFS is?
Yeah, so IFS, or internal family systems, it's kind of psychotherapy framework, but it's based on the idea that your mind is full of parts, and parts want different things, and mostly they are built in your early childhood. So you might have a part that, because your mom said that you're lazy, you have a part that thinks you're lazy and wants to work very hard to prove your mom wrong. And then that causes you to develop another part that's like, no, let's not work hard, I just want to play.
Yeah.
But the IFS idea of parts is that they are parts of the mind, but you can also find them in your body.
And did you discover IFS parts separately and then discover IFS, or did you discover the theory of IFS first and then go find some parts?
Originally in 2018, I was first introduced to a technique called internal double crux, which is a bit like a very simplified version of IFS, where you just like negotiate between different views you have.
Mm-hmm.
And then something weird happened that didn't fit that framework.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned about IFS and I started doing it. And a year ago, I also started doing somatic experiencing.
Okay.
Which, as the name suggests, it's a more body-based practice.
Right.
And I saw this trauma therapist for a few times who combined these two techniques into one.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, my parts were basically like thoughts in my mind.
Okay.
But with the SE, they became parts in my body.
Mm-hmm. That's how I experienced them. I discovered them first and then discovered IFS later when I was trying to explain like what was going on here. And I now sense them as, sensations that are kind of localized in a certain part of my body awareness that then I can essentially communicate with just by directing my intention towards them.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to the question of the similarities or differences between parts and chakras.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And of course, like I guess it must be mentioned that even though most chakra systems have like 5, 7, 9, I think a dozen chakras, there are also systems which have hundreds of them, and also have them like in your hands and arms and basically everywhere in your body. Mm-hmm. But I'm not very familiar with those systems. So to me, it seems like the chakras are points where like a lot of parts are inclined to be born or go or something into those areas.
Yeah.
But that's like one possible theory I have. I'm not really set on this theory. Yeah, but for example, I have a lot of parts in areas that most chakra systems don't have chakras in, such as the legs and feet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe they're kind of like a landscape or a background to the parts.
Yeah, it's also interesting when I started doing somatic experiencing,
Yeah.
my therapist started explaining like how this stuff works, and she started like saying that you might experience like a sensation of energy going up your back and through your crown. And I was like, that sounds very interesting. And then it basically turned out that the whole of somatic experiencing is basically working with Kundalini.
It's funny how all these things converge, isn't it?
Yeah.
How we're constantly rediscovering the same things over and over, just in different areas. Okay, so are you ready to move into the chakras themselves?
I would actually maybe read my poem first, if
Please,
that's
go
okay.
ahead.
Okay, let's see if I can see well enough here to read. I hope so. This poem is titled Nature. Please give me a brown paper bag to encase my thoughts in. I know the body is made out of molecules and ion channels and very faint electric fields that can expose a photographic plate, but it means nothing. Yet sometimes I lock the door, turn off the lights, and hide under the blanket, and there, in the darkness, I see my chakras glowing in the dark, even though they don't exist. I feel my goddess energy and my third eye pulsating, even though they don't exist. I can sense others' thoughts, even though thoughts don't exist, burning so bright it singes your retinas, should they exist. I want to step into a brown paper bag, but I fear that even through it, I'd shine a forbidden glow, a ball lightning, or will-o-wisp, which also don't exist. Or maybe they do, who knows? People see what they want or don't want, or are ambivalent about wanting. The list of real things is printed in nature, which also must be sold in a brown paper bag, as it contains things that don't exist. And even if they did, they'd flash like magnesium ribbons, volatile and too bright for our eyes. Citation needed.
Thank you. Thank you. That was lovely. I had a certain heart suture flavor to it.
I think it's really like trying to describe the inner conflict I've had with this experiencing things that people say, well, those aren't real.
Mm-hmm. And how does that change? You mentioned that you cycle a lot, basically, with the insight stages.
Yeah.
How does that change as you go through the insight cycle?
It really depends.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I do have also a lot of energy symptoms in the stages that where you're not supposed to have them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of a classical symptom of the arising and passing away, and maybe later on. But yeah, I haven't cycled enough to know how they change for me very much.
Yeah. But I basically do tend to have a lot of them in all the stages.
Okay. Very interesting.
And also, I want to say that one of the things that made me a bit like bit uneasy about this podcast. One thing is what I already mentioned, that my background is in medicine, blah, blah, blah. And the other thing is that I tend to have a lot of kriyas, or mostly involuntary movements when I do this kind of stuff. And it feels kind of like weird to me, like go on YouTube and hey, look at my involuntary movements, you know?
Yeah, that's okay. If you want me to pause the video, that's more than okay. You can turn your video off at any time if you don't feel safe or comfortable. And we can just post the audio. That's totally fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Or I can just do some kriyas with you and then we'll both look weird. Okay, so if you don't mind, maybe we'll drop into the heart. You can just let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Is it okay if I direct my questions directly to the heart center?
Yep.
And Heart, do you consent to being interviewed on this podcast?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad to have you. I'm wondering if you would like to say a few words about what it's like to be you.
It's basically I'm kind of directing the whole show here because it's all about love.
What is love?
Love is space and spaciousness.
And how?
And it feels quite weird, you know, to speak from this like emotional center, which I haven't done before.
Yeah. What is your role in maintaining the system in perspective of love?
I am the self, and my job is to this is so hard to translate, you know.
Yeah. What kind of things are coming up?
It's, you know, felt sense stuff that it's just like that I go through words and then it's like create, no, that's not the word, open, no. And it's like I didn't realize it would be this hard to find words.
Yeah. Is there a landscape or colors that are arising?
It currently feels like there's this flower in my chest. And I actually feel quite moved, and like, yeah, this is just a very emotional space to be in.
Yeah.
I guess it's hard to find words for love other than love,
That's
because
right.
all the verbs are kind of like not right.
Yeah. Do you have anything that that scares you from your heart?
Blackness.
What is blackness?
It's like a closeness, or I guess isolation is a bit like that.
Yeah. Separation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what makes you happy?
Just being able to spread the love in this body
Yeah.
to parts, to other people, to other beings.
Yes, that's what we're here to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know how we can work with our hearts for the benefit of all beings?
It's basically it feels like you don't necessarily work with the heart. You work with parts or things that are preventing your heart from being open.
Okay, so the default is open, and that maybe there are some things that are closing it off.
Yeah, such as trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's the society as a whole. It's like not like you're not only supposed to love your family and partner, and the idea that you can love more people or all people or more widely is not really sanctioned by the society.
Yeah, isn't that strange?
Yeah, but I guess it's really like people have so many parts that are afraid to love and afraid of being loved, and I guess also afraid of being left out.
Yes. They all kind of cloud together to cover the heart's natural openness.
Yeah.
Hmm. What's your relation to metta? I know Maija does a lot of metta.
I somehow knew you would ask that next. It's really I it's really the heart is spreading the metta currently, like around me. It's a very strong relationship, but also the heart is like closely related to the IFS idea of self.
Mm-hmm. And what's your relationship with the other chakras?
My job is to keep them awake, and like not necessarily like enlightenment awake, but like in a more mundane sense, awake and connected.
Mm-hmm. Organizing the show, as you said it.
Yeah. It's kind of like I'm the mom to the others.
Oh, yeah, that's great perspective. Motherly love. Okay, well, we're gonna go visit your children. It's very nice to meet you. We'll come back to you at the end, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, shall we move down to the solar plexus?
Sure.
Great. Are you ready?
Yeah. I'm sensing some tension and resistance.
Okay.
but I'm not entirely sure why, or like it feels kind of like it might think that this is like a bit too private, but also I still, it still seems like it's fine to go on.
Okay, I can tell the solar plexus that I come in the love and the light of the one infinite creator for the highest and greatest benefit of all beings. And if it consents to being interviewed, I would love to talk to it.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. You noticed some tension. What was the origin of the tension or the resistance?
It seems to come from child parts that think this is silly.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of conditioning based on how we grew up. I don't know how you grew up, but I didn't grow up with any of this stuff.
Yeah, I grew up in a very super atheist family.
Okay. So there's probably some skepticism deeply embedded in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Solar plexus, what's your role in the chakra system?
Some sort of controlling or guarding.
What kinds of things are you controlling?
Setting boundaries.
A very important skill. How do you do that? What's a skillful way to set boundaries with people or beings?
A skillful way is to communicate with the other parts of the body, but it feels like the heart chakra is a bit more has more open boundaries, while the solar plexus is a bit more like a bit more closed.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense to me. What role do you have in shaping the personality?
Kind of like a backbone, or also there it's some kind of control and inner boundaries.
Maintain.
And I get the sense that it feels like I don't listen to it enough.
Okay, so it's telling you that it maybe wants a little more control over what's going on.
It feels like it sets enough external boundaries, but it feels like my personality is a bit unhinged for its like. But this may also be, I think I'm hearing some child parts that are a bit afraid of like being too open and too effusive.
Yeah. Yeah, they're probably relating to each other. Yeah, that sense of strength, though, of maybe determination is really important for getting things done in our lives that we need to get done. And it sounds like you might play a role in getting things done.
It feels like that's more teamwork with the solar plexus and the upper chakras, which makes sense that it's really like there are so many elements to that process.
Yeah, it's not a one chakra party here. Everyone's together, huh?
Yeah.
What's something that people sometimes misunderstand about you and your role?
It feels like I like people don't see me as much, like, because Maija's personality is so warm and effusive that people see more of the heart chakra, and also because she's also intellectual, people see those chakras, but not like this more controlling feels, it's such a negative word, that like this more serious backbone.
Yeah, a inner strength in a way.
Yeah, and it's also, I guess it's like people see Maija as a very, like, they often are surprised that she's very like organizational and neat and stuff like that, and not just like a boho hippie.
And you play a role in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very skillful activity. It's very important. It sounds like you're doing a great job. Is there anything else you'd like Maija to know about your how to work skillfully with you?
You should listen to me more when you're not giving interviews. Ouch.
That's valuable advice. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us before we move on?
Try to listen to all parts of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for that advice. Thank you for your vulnerability and your willingness to be present here. We appreciate it. Maija, what did you think of that?
It was interesting, but it's definitely like, yeah, there were some valid points, but also I could hear some child parts that were maybe like I do feel I also listen to that part of myself, so
Yeah.
I feel it wasn't entirely warranted.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, shall we drop into the sacral?
Yeah, sure.
And Sacral Chakra, are you willing to be interviewed today?
Yes.
Great, thanks for being here. I understand you might have a poem you'd like to read.
Yeah, should I start with that?
Please, please do.
Okay, so this poem is titled BDHSM, but which might make it sound a bit like, well, it's pretty like not too weird. I like pain, but I don't like suffering. I get off on orange fabric and shiny things like bald heads and the mirror-like nature of the mind. I get off on links of dependent arising and how they leave karmic imprints on my flesh. I get off being hit with a stick in a way that gives me a kensho, but honestly, who doesn't? I get off on consonants without vowels, the lurid breathy H's, and how the retroflexes snap in my mouth. I get off on spaces between words and space without words. Either way, it's the right size for me to slide in. I'm not ashamed unless that gets me off. Aversion and grasping tie me to this samsaric body, the bodies of all beings.
Thank you.
That was a very sacral chakra poem.
It was indeed. So we can talk to the sacral again. Yeah. So do you want to tell us what is the feeling that you have when that poem is being read?
The poem is about connection, and it's really basically for Maija, all poetry and writing poetry and especially reading poetry is about connection. And I play a role there. So I basically play a role in all the poetry she writes.
Yeah.
This poem is also much more explicitly about connection, and it's literally like connection to all beings, and like how that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. The goal of what?
I guess existence.
Yeah, is there anything except connection here?
Well, the poem is also about shame and love and fantasies, and it's how they form. Like these are all very like core basic things of being a human. Like we all house a lot of shame, and a lot of it tends to be housed here.
Has it been difficult to awaken out of that on your journey?
To some extent, yes.
Can you tell us some of the modes of being that helped you do that?
It's IFS has been very helpful because it has helped unlock shame that Maija wasn't aware that was there, because she grew up in quite a liberal secular home. So it's really like there isn't supposed to be like that religious shame that many people have.
Yeah.
But it turns out that you can pick up shame from many different ways and different people.
Yeah. What's the skillful way of relating with shame?
It's the first thing is that you have to be aware that it's there. You have to accept that it's there. And it's really like like it's so easy to have shame about shame.
Okay. Yeah.
Especially, for example, if the shame is about things related to sexuality. And the current world is like, you shouldn't have a shame because we are this very open world nowadays.
Yeah, it just layers on top of itself, huh?
Yeah, and shame feels very, it feels vulnerable, and it feels primal and also like childish.
So once this shame starts dissolving, what takes its place?
Openness and connection. And also forgiveness.
Forgiveness, yes. Have you done a lot of forgiveness?
Forgiveness is really has been mostly like stemming from other practices and like things opening up, and that like opens up space for forgiveness.
Yeah, the space is an interesting point. When everything's crammed together, you almost can't you can't see it and well enough to let go of it.
Yeah, and I feel like there's really like shame is quite a gendered thing. Like men and women, or people who are born as men and women may hold a different kind of shame, and especially I feel like women are more vulnerable to shame, and especially holding shame in this area, and it also tends to make the muscles very tense.
Yeah, as it builds up. What relationship do you have with gender?
Gender doesn't like it I don't have a gender. This chakra doesn't have a gender, but it's kind of collects the fallout of gender, if that makes sense. Like everything that has to do with the sacral chakra tends to be centered, like sexuality, connection, social life, all of that has a lot of gendered vibes and gendered ideas. So even though this chakra isn't gendered, it's like gender stuff collects there.
Yeah, it sinks down. You mentioned atheism before. What's your relationship now with God, or something you might call God?
It's a very complex subject.
Yeah.
But it's definitely there is God in my world, but it's like perhaps not even a God or the God, it's just God. And it's kind of hard to explain, but it's definitely not the creator God.
Huh? In your first poem, you mentioned goddess. What is goddess?
Goddess energies is one of those things that initially felt hard to relate, because it felt like such a feminine concept, and maybe even like cliched femininity concept. And it felt like there wasn't enough femininity in me. Like not enough in the sense of like I was deficient in femininity, but more like I just didn't feel very feminine but as more stuff opened up, also that energy opened up.
And how did that feel, getting in touch with that energy?
It was interesting, and I'm getting quite nice felt senses that I don't know how to put into words, which maybe just because English isn't my first language, but it was quite beautiful, and but also a bit weird to only access that kind of energy at this age.
Yeah. I guess we're growing throughout our lives. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
It's definitely like I wouldn't have been able a few years ago. I wouldn't have been able to talk about this stuff. Of course, I also hadn't discovered a lot of this stuff then, but talking about some of this stuff would have caused shame or at least something related to shame.
Well, congratulations on your ability to open up, and thank you for being here to speak with us today. Okay, are we ready to move down to the root?
Yep.
Great. Is the root there?
Yeah, it's feeling a bit heavy and a bit sad, but yeah, it's willing to be interviewed.
Well, thank you for your presence here. Would you want to talk about why you're feeling sad?
It's to do with some interpersonal stuff that has been processing in a lot of different places in this body, but currently it's the most heavily processed here.
And what's your relationship with processing that kind of inner conflict, I guess?
It's not really conflict. It's kind of like this primal sadness, and there's also something about wanting things and not being able to get those things.
Suffering, tanha.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your role in the energy body as the root chakra?
I carry the stuff that's above me, and it's a bit of a heavy job, and it also means that sometimes stuff falls on me, as is happening now with this process.
Yeah, how does that feel to be kind of the last I don't know, the ground on which everything is based?
Often it feels fine or even great, but currently it's a bit heavy.
Is there anything the other chakras could do to lighten the load?
Yeah, they could send some more love and attention this way.
That would be a nice thing. I'll send some as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Also this feeling that currently the other chakras aren't really like, they are trying a bit to like stay away from this stuff or exile this stuff.
Mm-hmm. But you're strong enough to deal with it.
I am strong enough to deal with it, but it feels a bit lonely here now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of muscular tension or like more like tensing than tension going on right now.
Mm-hmm. What's your relationship to safety?
There's definitely there is a child part here that currently doesn't feel safe enough because of this stuff that's going on.
Mm-hmm. And what's your relationship to that child part? Are you able to help take care of it, or?
I'm trying to protect that part,
Mm-mm.
but it feels like this thing will probably take some time.
Yeah. Do you have any sense of where you came from, how old you are, where you evolved from?
I I am older than the others, but other than that, I don't know. But I also get the sense that someone is disagreeing with this.
One of the other chakras?
Yeah,
Okay. But you feel maybe a bit ancient.
yeah.
You've been around for a while. When you are at your kind of optimal capacity, what do you think makes for a good life?
Being centered but still open.
Mm-hmm. Centered in which dimensions?
3 or 4.
Can you name any of those?
There's a sense that this chakra really wants to be at the center of everything.
Mm-hmm. And why is that?
Because that's the way I naturally am.
Hmm. As a human, or?
As this chakra, I'm kind of getting this weird geometric idea of how how this chakra is the center and the others kind of spread out from it.
Okay. Is it like anything you've seen before?
No, but it's kind of like a fan,
Okay.
like a paper fan.
Okay. Yeah. The root is like the hinge almost that connects them.
Yeah.
Hmm. Does the root have anything to say about that geometry?
It's there's something about the way that the chakras are normally presented, like kind of like a line.
Yeah.
It doesn't really feel entirely right because
Okay.
it's very two-dimensional.
Okay. Yeah, I've wondered that myself sometimes. Hmm. Is time one of the dimensions that it's interested in centering itself in?
There's something about time, but I don't know how to translate it, but it seems mostly time isn't so relevant.
Okay. Hmm.
Or it's relevant, but in a different way.
Okay. Root, is there anything else you would like to share with us?
That most people don't listen to their own root chakras because it's like in this body area that people rather not think about.
Mm-hmm. And how would people be benefited if they did listen?
They would notice they have some stuckness, but people also prefer not to notice their own stuckness.
Hmm. That is a thing that humans do. And what can we do once we're unstuck that we can't do when we're stuck?
There is something about the relationship of openness,
Mm-hmm.
spaciousness,
Mm-hmm.
safety, protection,
Mm-hmm.
and how to be grounded but not be stuck.
Grounded. That's a great, very important skill to have, and very powerful. Well, thank you for your presence here, Root.
I get the sense that it it feels like it's a chakra that other people listen to the least. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a nice experience.
Yeah, Maija, what do you think about the last couple chakras?
Yeah, that was interesting, and for me, I feel like that there's something about their functions and their anatomic positions that have made them a bit blended for me in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not so like I'm most familiar with my heart chakra because it's both like anatomically and it has this kind of clear and easy signal.
Yeah. Yeah, were you having a harder time to tune into kind of the frequency of the lower chakras?
Yeah, and it's really I feel like I have only got more connected to them more recently while the heart has been quite open and free for a longer time.
Yeah.
I guess with spirituality in general, it's easy to get stuck into like this mindset that, well, everything is love. If I love, that's enough. I don't have to care about anything else.
Yeah, but it sounds like these other chakras have more work for you to do.
Yeah.
They want more connection maybe, and more groundedness, I guess.
Yeah, but it's also like, as I said, this process that's been going on, it's been mostly a thing this week.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of it is related to the fact that like now as we're recording it, it's Christmas Eve, which of course is a very loaded time of the year.
Yes.
If there are parts that struggle with isolation, separation, loneliness, sadness, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a really big time for them to come out.
Yeah.
Are you feeling okay in general with your energy levels and things?
Yeah.
Great. Shall we go up to the crown?
Yeah, sure.
Hello, is the crown present?
Yeah. I'm always present. That's the point.
And are you okay with me interviewing you today?
Sure.
What is presence?
There's this strong image of there being a satellite dish on my head.
And what's the meaning of that?
It feels like I, as in the chakra, I'm currently in broadcast mode. Like it's possible to be in a more receptive or transmitting mode.
Okay.
But currently it's this is like a broadcast mode.
Yeah. And what are you broadcasting?
There's like the true frequency, like getting the radio tuned just right.
Yeah. Dialing it in. And who's listening on the other end?
Currently it feels like it's funny because it feels like I'm actually doing this broadcast and trying to make the listeners of this see my true frequency.
Mm-hmm. And what do you want them to see?
Just like the true frequency of me, because it's or Maija, because it's so easy. Well, when people see other people, they always interpret, make assumptions and stuff like that. So it's like trying to broadcast the real me.
Yeah, I'm getting a flavor for what that is. Do you think people are in tune with that kind of broadcast from other people?
I feel like the broadcast I send in particular, Maija's broadcast very easily gets tangled by people, and it's of course all of our broadcasts get very tangled by other people who see them through their own traumas and parts and perspectives and worldviews. But it feels like this particular broadcast is very prone to getting mixed up.
What are some skillful ways that people can use to clean their antennas or to help receive better broadcasts, more true frequencies?
In IFS, there's the concept of self, and being in self means that you are not blended with any particular part. So you're kind of like in a neutral ground of being. And then you're much better able to see people as who they are and not through your very biased ideas that you have already formed about them and the world.
Do we need to be in the physical presence of a person to hear each other's broadcasts?
No, it actually feels like Maija's broadcast tends to be more tangled up in real life and is actually transmitted better over video calls or something.
And what's your relationship with time? Does it matter when the broadcast takes place or when people receive it?
It doesn't really otherwise matter, but of course, if people are going through stuff in their life, in that sense, it matters, because if you're going through stuff, you're probably not going to receive anyone properly.
And what's it like when you're in receiving mode? From whom do you receive the strongest messages?
I'm also always also in receiving mode, but because I also tend to transmit a lot, people often get a bit confused by that.
Why do you think they get confused?
It feels like it has something to do with many people being more clearly in either mode at once, like either transmitting or receiving.
And what makes for a good dialogue, do you think?
A good dialogue is when people are really present, and you have to basically be in self to really be present, but you don't have to be familiar with IFS to be able to be in self, because people who meditate are probably quite able to get into self.
Yeah. What does spirituality mean to you?
It's also about tuning the frequencies.
Can you say more about that? About expanding the range of frequencies, or what's your idea of that?
It feels more like your radio might be set on a channel and you're like, this is pretty good music, but then you find out that actually it's not tuned correctly, like it's very much off the channel, and then you tune it better so that it's like right at the frequency of that radio channel, and wow, it sounds so much better.
Yeah. And what kind of celestial music do you prefer listening to?
It's It's not really about the type of music. It's really just pretty much everything sounds nice if it's tuned correctly.
Okay. Even the things we like to maybe avoid in our personal lives, like suffering.
Yeah, that's also another channel that's very often tuned incorrectly.
And what's it like when you tune it correctly?
It's clear
Mm-hmm.
and crisp, and it makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips for tuning our antennas better?
Find ways to be in self, especially when you're communicating with people.
Mm-hmm.
And also, what are the things that are preventing you from being in self and being present and being able to hear the frequencies properly?
Thank you. That's very wise advice. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Not from this chakra, but there is apparently a part that feels this chakra is just trying to sound very smart.
Maybe a little skeptic in there.
Yeah, it feels like it's being skeptical about the fact that it's possible to come up with a metaphor on the spot that both sounds good and actually like is real.
Mm-hmm. Because it's probably more complicated than we're giving it credit for with
Yeah.
the analogy. Yeah. But I did detect a lot of earnestness there. So I think there's a truth there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, shall we come down to the third eye?
Sure.
Is the third eye present?
Yeah. This is one of the parts where I tend to get a lot of mostly involuntary movements.
Okay. And the third eye, do you consent to being interviewed today?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here. Can you tell us about the Kriyas?
It's like there's a lot of energy stuff that's going on, and it's not necessarily related to this area,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like arrives in this area from other parts of the body.
Mm-hmm. And third eye, what's your relationship to energy? What does that mean to you?
These kriyas are making it a bit hard to focus on what it's trying to say. Can you ask the question again?
I was asking, what's the third eye's relationship to energy? How does it perceive energy?
It's I'm an important center for electricity,
Mm-hmm.
and as I said, I kind of collect electricity and energy from other parts of the body as well.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do with that energy?
I process it, I transmit it, I store it.
And what are the results of working skillfully with you and this energy for the human?
When there's this excess energy stuff, I'm able to dispel it.
Mm-hmm. And that helps to regulate the system in a way?
Yeah, though this is coming from Maija and not the third eye, but
Yeah.
I'm still a bit like, as you can see, it sometimes feels like the regulation doesn't fully work, and then this kind of stuff keeps happening.
Yeah. Hmm. Are there things the other chakras can do to help you regulate yourself, the third eye?
They could process more of their own stuff and not send it all to me.
Mm-hmm. You're taking on a lot of the burden for the system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels like they initially tried it and then it seemed to work, and then they have been just sending a lot of their like excess or misdirected or stagnant or something like that energy to me.
Mm-hmm. What's your understanding of enlightenment?
That's kind of what I'm here for.
Mm.
And the point of enlightenment is it's pretty much in the name. Like you have two normal eyes, and yeah, what's the point of having the third eye? So that you can see something that you can't see with the two normal ones.
Mm-hmm. So what is the light of enlightenment?
It's a dimension.
Mm-hmm. Not a normal dimension?
Oh,
Could you
but
describe?
it's a dimension of light.
Mm-hmm. Is it infinite, do you think?
Isn't everything kind of infinite?
Yeah, as humans, we sometimes have a hard time of seeing this, but I suppose you have better access to it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm here to help people see.
Mm-hmm. What can we do to better see this?
Process your shit.
We have a lot of it, huh?
Yeah, because it's quite hard to see things clearly if you're like burdened with a lifetime of issues.
Mm-hmm. What are your favorite ways of clearing your shit?
Letting energy flow beautifully out of the body
Mm-hmm.
with the help of the crown chakra.
Mm-hmm. Working together.
Yeah,
What is that relationship like with the crown?
we are kind of like brothers,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm more focused on seeing, and the crown is more focused with the frequency stuff.
Yeah. So do you hold a lot of the wisdom and knowledge?
Not really hold. It's more like a lens.
Mm-hmm. And who's looking through the lens?
No one.
No one. And what are they not looking at?
Maija is looking through the lens, but also hasn't fully realized yet that it's simultaneously no one looking and it's just the lens.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I might have heard some Buddhas talk about this before.
Yeah, it's possible.
Do you know any Buddhas?
No, but I'm hoping to know more about that soon.
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Just a hunch.
Well, I wish you very good luck in that.
Thanks.
Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
My point isn't really to share.
Well, thank you for your presence here. It's been delightful. Maija, what do you think of that?
With these chakras, I could definitely sense parts that were like commenting on them. Like I said, the part that was like, come on, you can't just make something like that. That sounds cool. If it sounds cool, it probably isn't like meaningful.
Yeah.
And with the third eye, with the kriyas, it feels like there's a part that's like that is worried that some viewers will think that I'm making this stuff up
Yeah.
in the belief that it makes me seem more advanced or spiritual or something.
Mm-hmm. I can
Like
say
if I wanted to
oh,
seem more spiritual, I would have better or more elegant ways of doing that than scrunching my face.
yeah. I think the listeners of this podcast are not the type who are going to be judging anyone for having kriyas.
Yeah, but it's really like I've been saying, I have parts that are very aware of like my smart medical writer image, and they think of people who are not familiar with this stuff will go to this podcast and like browse it randomly and be like, what, that stuff is so out there and she's just making it all up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a hard thing. I mean, coming out as spiritual is as hard as coming out in other areas, I think, in some ways, because we're not given validation for having these kinds of thoughts or feelings or experiences most of the time.
Yeah, but it's also a lot of Buddhist books in particular are constantly warning you, like, if you have this experience, don't think it makes you better or more advanced or more spiritual. And people tend to be attached to kriyas and jhanas and this and that, and then they think they are something special. And I guess some parts are really like that's not what this is about. I'm not trying to be special.
Yeah, there's almost a shame there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, many I feel like many Buddhist and meditation books are really trying hard to make you the right kind of meditator, and they're often giving out advice like, don't do this, don't get attached to this, you wouldn't want to be this bad meditator. And I think that's not very helpful, because then you get attached to not being that guy that he's warning about.
Yeah, it's a tricky path, right? If you're trying to guide people and avoid pitfalls, sometimes maybe you overemphasize the pitfalls and not
Yeah, but for
yeah,
example, when I first started having kriyas in the summer of 2018,
Mhm.
I had read many meditation books, and they were all like, if weird stuff is happening in your body, it's like a distraction.
Yeah.
Don't focus on it. It's not important. And only really when I got into somatic experiencing 2 years later, I was like, wait, what? This stuff has been going, it has been there for ages. And I was told not to focus on it. And that's actually terrible advice.
Yeah, I found it too. Like, I mean, if part of the goal here of the spiritual path is to like become a better person, then dealing with your shit is an important way of doing that instead of kind of ignoring it. And then I guess their theory is if you just get enlightened, then it'll all go away or something. I don't know exactly what their idea is, but I found it very valuable to deal with it as it comes up, and then it's dealt with, and then you can move on and kind of build off a more stable platform.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it's just because we're householders. Maybe if you were in a monastery, the good instructions would be to just ignore it. But I agree with you. I don't think it's a very skillful way for most people.
I'm not very convinced it's good advice for anyone, really.
Yeah. Okay, shall we move down to the throat chakra?
Sure.
Yeah. Throat chakra. Are you okay with being interviewed today?
Yeah,
Do you like talking?
sure.
It seems like something you might do a lot of.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, what does communication mean to you?
Communication means talking about stuff that is important, which of course is very context dependent,
Mhm.
but people have this tendency to talk a lot about stuff that isn't so important, to avoid talking about the important stuff. And I also have that tendency, of course.
Yeah. For example, reading Twitter, you see a lot of stuff that's maybe not so important.
Yeah,
Why do we pay so much attention to that stuff?
it's it's like a nice distraction for the important stuff.
Hmm.
But it's also really, it's easy to get worn out if you're focused on important stuff 24/7.
Yeah. Maybe some distraction is valuable in letting us reset.
Yeah,
What are the important things?
it really depends on the context,
Hmm.
because it's really everything can have subtext.
Hmm.
So for example, if someone has died, and sometimes if someone is grieving, sometimes showing them a meme from Twitter can actually be important speech. in that context.
Mm-hmm. Have you always been as open as you are now?
Definitely not. I thought, or Maija thought, that I was fully open.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, Maija also has had a lot of issues with her voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so some she actually even attended a voice coach a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't all parts related, but occasionally there's stuff that is. And even yesterday there was some stuff that was making her voice sound strained.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a bit worried that it would happen during this recording too.
Yeah. I found a lot of parts in my throat area related to truth telling. What's your relationship with that?
For me, it's been more about authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that could be said to be the same thing, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really like, am I allowed to speak my truth, or will people react to it in a bad way?
Yeah. Have you had experiences where people reacted to your truth in a bad way?
Yeah, basically all my life.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of people have that?
Yeah, I think, and for a lot of people, it makes them more quiet. And I've always been the opposite of a quiet person.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's more like I more easily go into babbling mode rather than not say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also there was an issue a few years ago when someone commented on Maija's voice
Mm-hmm.
in a negative way
Mm-hmm.
that caused some issue, and the way she always felt that she can't sing,
Okay.
which she has tried to heal by singing a lot recently.
That's great. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and I really like singing
Yeah.
because it makes me vibrate.
Yeah. Would you like to sing us a little song right now?
I'm not brave enough for that.
That's okay. How about, would you like to make a nonverbal sound that communicates your feelings right now? Mm, thank you. What role do you play in manifesting um, desires or needs?
Yeah, this is also a big role I play. And I will always try to be open about my needs, but it has often been received badly by other people, which is why I've shut down in the past, to the point that in a few occasions Maija has been completely unable to speak because it was like a conflict of parts that were like, no, it's not safe to say anything.
Yeah, that must be difficult.
Yeah, it was hard, and it's also very difficult for people when you're not speaking to them. It really triggers a lot of people.
Yeah, speech is very powerful, but silence is also very powerful. Hmm.
Yeah.
What do you think it would be like to live in a society where people could speak their truth freely?
It's a really lovely thought, but it also seems very far away.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because societies generally have not responded so well to people having two different truths.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any ideas of how we could work towards such a society?
It really starts with the families in your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really like people should be told more explicitly, like not just things parents say you're not allowed to or you shouldn't say this, but they don't tell you what you should say. So it kind of creates a culture where there's a lot of things that you shouldn't talk about, like don't talk about sex, don't talk about money, don't talk about politics.
Yeah.
But very little things like things you should say.
Yeah. We need maybe some more good examples of people speaking their truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any insights into your origin or evolution?
That's not really my area of expertise.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how humans have this speech faculty that doesn't seem to be as abundant in other species.
Yeah, though it's interesting that some completely unrelated species like parrots can perfectly imitate human speech.
Yeah, that is pretty incredible. What makes you the happiest?
When I'm vibrating freely, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole crux of my existence.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I vibrate freely, it really vibrates in the whole body.
Yeah. What's the importance of vibrations?
Well, basically, everything in the body is vibrations.
Mm-hmm. And can we work skillfully with those vibrations?
Yeah, but you have to actually want to.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
I like words and I like sounds too.
Yeah, Maija writes a lot of poetry. Do you play a role in that?
I play a role mostly in the reading of that poetry, but
Mm-hmm.
I also like sounds that are not necessarily connected to words.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us some examples?
For example, just the sound which is like one of our most basic sounds.
Yes. Do you do mantra work?
Yeah, I do.
That sounds like the seed syllables that are the root of everything, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for speaking with us, speaking your truth today.
Yeah, I'm always glad when I get to do that.
It's been a pleasure. Okay, should we return to the heart?
Sure.
Great. Heart, are you there?
Yeah.
How did it?
So weirdly, I'm sensing less openness than when we started.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like some of these parts that I mentioned are kind of maybe trying to block the heart from being fully open.
Okay. Is the heart still okay if we go on?
Yeah.
Heart, how do you feel having heard all these other chakras speak today?
It's been really great because they are like my family.
Yeah. Did you learn anything that might have surprised you?
Yeah, I should listen more to the lower chakras.
Mm-hmm. They have some important information, I guess.
Yeah, it feels like there's a bit of a tendency to be more fond of the upper chakras because they're like more spiritual
Mm-hmm.
or something, and not give as much attention to the lower ones.
Mm-hmm. You're sitting in the middle where you can maybe balance them.
Yeah.
And do you have any advice for the listeners here on how to skillfully integrate the different chakras?
It really depends on where you have the most issues or most which chakras are the most blocked for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, this the heart has been very easy to open,
Mm-hmm.
but for a lot of people it's not easy.
Yeah, there can be a lot of parts there who might be blocking that opening.
Yeah, and a lot of people who are into spirituality are more keen to open the upper chakras because they are like the more intellectual ones.
Right. Yeah, there is that tendency. But then that
But
leaves a lot of unresolved maybe trauma at the lower chakras that comes out when people have maybe psychotic episodes.
yeah, which I've unfortunately witnessed too many times in people I know.
Yeah. Do you think they could have been avoided if they had worked more skillfully with their lower chakras?
I'm not sure which chakras specifically they had avoided,
Mm-hmm.
but all these people have had a very strong tendency to avoid stuff. Like if something doesn't feel good, they steer away
Yeah.
and pretend it doesn't exist,
Yeah.
which I guess is a very human tendency, but it can lead to a lot of bad results at its extreme, even psychosis.
Yeah. Well, Hart, it's been such a pleasure having you here. Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
It's there's a lot of things that I would like to say, but people are like, yeah, we heard that, that's so cliched, and yeah, we know you should love people and blah blah blah, but
I would like to hear them. I would like to hear all the cliches.
yeah, like love other people, but also love yourself, love all your parts,
Yes.
your whole body, your whole chakra
Yeah.
system. And if there are like things that you have a harder time to love, try to dedicate more attention to those parts for the reasons I already mentioned. You can't really have balance, like if you open some of your chakras really wide, and if you heal many parts, it may not help much if you if it's not balanced.
Yeah, we need to pay special attention to the ones that are unhealed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes they're the most difficult to work with.
Yeah, but this is very important. They can all be healed, and it's worth it, even though it may seem difficult and it makes you flinch and you want to turn away, and you'll be like, that's too difficult, I don't want to go there. But if you go there, you can heal it, you can do it, it's worth it, and it's the most amazing feeling.
I agree. Thank you so much. Maija, how do you feel about that? That was quite the tour.
Yeah, that was quite a journey. And initially I was a bit worried because, I'm more used to talking to my parts than talking to my chakras. And I was like, what if they don't say anything? And then the whole thing will be a huge disappointment.
Well, I think you got the hang of it. It seemed to, as you went along, maybe you got better at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything that particularly surprised you or that you might want to focus on more in your meditations or inner work?
Not that much really. Like I knew there was stuff going on at the root, but I will search for more parts in the lower parts of my torso and see what's going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like they have some things to say.
Yeah.
Well, I had a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed your time here.
Yeah, I sure did.
And do you have anything you'd like to promote? A book or a Twitter account or anything?
Yeah, my YouTube channel where I have guided meditations and guided hypnosis audios, and I'm going to have an energy work hypnosis audio there soon.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so I assume you can post a link under this so I don't have to spell it out.
I will indeed. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for being here, and have a happy Christmas.
Thank you for inviting me, and you too, and all your parts.
Thank you, Maija.